What if the love moving inside you is not a mood to be managed, nor a surge of chemistry to be explained away, but a sacred assignment entrusted to you before your first breath? What if your heart is not an accident of biology, but a deliberate design, scribed in heaven, sealed with purpose, and placed within you as a living covenant? If you have ever felt out of place in the way you love, too deep for a shallow room, too tender for a hardened age, then this is not a defect to correct. It is a signal to decode. Stay with me, because what follows is not a theory to admire from a distance. It is an activation meant to meet you where you actually live. Look around and you will see how love has been downsized into performance. Fast, transactional, measured by convenience, edited for applause. People trade curated fragments and call it connection, rehearse confessions that never risk truth, and wonder why the heart keeps starving. And yet beneath the noise, there you are, loving in a way the timeline cannot explain. You tried to dim yourself to fit the room. You rehearsed being less, so no one would call you too much. You folded your edges to avoid being the one who cares more. But every time you shrank, something holy in you protested. The ache you felt was not weakness. It was memory. It was the blueprint refusing to be erased. Perhaps you have been told that your compassion is naive, your loyalty impractical, your sensitivity a liability. Perhaps you poured out what you had to people who could not hold it, and you walked home with the quiet shame of wondering why you are built like this. Hear me, you are not broken. You are appointed. Heaven encoded your heart to notice what others overlook, to dignify what others discard, to build where others abandon. Your love was never designed to survive on the scraps of cultural convenience. It was crafted to carry weight. But before we lift you with promise, we must touch the wound with honesty. There is a cost to loving in your natural depth. You have been misunderstood by those who measure everything by speed. You have been taken for granted by those who consume affection as entertainment. You have been betrayed in the exact places you were most sincere, and in those long nights when the room went quiet. You wondered if the only way to be safe was to be smaller, if the only way to stop hurting was to stop feeling. The world calls your depth too much because it has grown comfortable on the surface. Yet what the world mocks is the very thing heaven marks. You are set apart not to perform extraordinary affection, but to host a love that does not fail when feelings fade, a love that can stand in weather. Here is the truth most people never hear. Your love is not merely an emotion you experience. It is an assignment you embody. It is architecture, not ambience. Covenant, not chemistry. When your heart leans toward a person others have abandoned, when you see gold under rubble, when your presence steadies a room without a word, these are not sentimental quirks. These are the signatures of your design. You were not placed here to blend into patterns that collapse under pressure. You were sent to build foundations that can carry the weight of storms. And yet, you do not have to carry this alone or prove it in a hurry. The blueprint does not ask for spectacle. It asks for stewardship. Over the next moments, we will unveil how your heart was drafted with intention, why pain became its forge, how discernment guards its strength, and how the love you carry becomes a bridge where heaven enters ordinary rooms. We will speak to the places where you almost shut down and show you why you didn't, why you couldn't, and how that refusal has already become your authority. If something in you is stirring, if the language of this resonates like a name you have always had but rarely heard, consider it confirmation. Before we go further, subscribe to the channel now. It costs nothing and keeps this signal reaching you on the days you need it most. Think of it as choosing to protect the part of you that loves deeply rather than letting the noise drown it out. Take a breath. Let the noise recede. Allow yourself to be addressed as the custodian of a rare gift, not the culprit of a strange defect. From here we move deliberately, first into the divine design of your heart, the choices heaven made when it wrote love into your architecture, and then into the living proof that your too much is exactly enough for what this generation lacks. Before you were a name in anyone's mouth, you were an intention in God's mind. Long before your first cry startled the room, a quieter sound preceded it, the scribing of a blueprint. Not a plan for accolades or applause, but a design centered around a single stubborn element: love. Not the thin kind that collapses when convenience leaves, but a rooted ancient love that knows how to hold weight. This is why certain rooms feel too small for you. This is why your chest grows heavy when people reduce connection to performance. Your architecture was never meant to live on shallow shelves. Consider how your inner life moves. Where others scan the surface, your attention lingers. You notice tremors beneath smiles, you hear the unsaid, you feel the seam where a story is beginning to split. That is not you being dramatic. It is you being designed. Heaven threaded sensitivity into your wiring, not as a liability to apologize for, but as instrumentation, a set of spiritual sensors finely tuned to dignity, beauty, and pain. When you lean towards someone who seems too much for the world, you're not indulging a soft spot. You are answering an assignment. Your kindness is not a personality quirk. It is a key that turns locks other people have stopped trying to open. This design is strategic. A builder does not choose fragile materials for a bridge expected to carry travelers through storms. In the same way, your heart was forged to be both tender and tensile. You can hold contradiction without shattering, grief and gratitude in one breath, boundaries and mercy in the same sentence. You can sit in a room that feels like winter and keep a fire lit long enough for someone else to thaw. And though you have been told your warmth is naivete, look closer at your history. You are still here. That is not the survival record of a gullible soul. That is the evidence of a design that works. Yet design does not exempt you from misunderstanding. People who measure value by speed will call your patience inefficiency. People who fear intimacy will mistake your honesty for intensity. People addicted to performance will mislabel your presence as passivity because it does not chase applause. When this chorus grows loud, you may feel tempted to edit yourself, to speak less truth, to care less deeply, to give less freely. But every time you have tried to shrink, a holy protest rose in you. That ache is your blueprint saying, remain in specification. You were not issued for a disposable culture. You were commissioned for endurance. Let's name what your heart actually does, because the world keeps misdescribing it. When you listen, without rushing to fix, you are creating a sanctuary where shame cannot breathe. When you tell the truth gently, you are pouring foundation where denial once cracked the floor. When you choose fidelity over novelty, you are laying beams that can carry the weight of another person's becoming. None of this looks spectacular in a short clip, which is why it's easy to overlook. But if you could see the time lapse of the rooms you inhabit, how anxiety lowers when you enter, how clarity rises after you speak, you would stop calling your design extra and start calling it what heaven calls it, essential. Of course, every design has tolerances. Yours includes rest. To carry this kind of love, you cannot live on the edge of depletion and expect your architecture to hold. You were built to draw from a deeper well than feedback or reciprocity. That is why your solitude is not loneliness. It is maintenance. In those quiet hours, you are not withdrawing from people. You are returning to source. You rehearse the sound of your name spoken by the one who wrote it. You remember that you were beloved before you were useful. And when you rise from that silence, you are not merely recharged. You are realigned, which is better than energy and lasts longer than hype. There is also wisdom in how your design distributes love. A river that tries to water every field becomes a swamp. You are permitted to be specific. Assignment is not indiscriminate. It is directed. Let the spirit mark the places where your investment multiplies rather than evaporates. This is not hardness of heart. It is fidelity to purpose. When you give beyond your call, resentment grows. When you give within your call, joy replenishes you while you pour. The difference is not how much you love, but where you are sent to love. What about your scars? They are not contradictions in the plan. They are annotations. Each healed wound is a note in the margin. Here the structure was tested and held. You learned the contours of betrayal so you could recognize it early and shield others. You learned how silence can harm, so you became a voice that refuses to abandon truth. You learned that forgiveness without boundaries is erosion, so you learned to forgive cleanly and guard wisely. This is not cynicism. It is craftsmanship. The heart that once bent to every wind now knows how to face weather without losing shape. Perhaps the most radical part of your design is this. Your love is prophetic. It does not simply mirror what is. It reveals what could be. When you look at a person sunk under years of disappointment and still call forth the gold in them, you are not fantasizing. You are reading an earlier draft. Heaven shows you blueprints the world forgot, and your words become scaffolding someone can climb. Not every seed you plant will sprout in your sight, but seeds are not less real because they grow underground. Trust the geometry you cannot yet see. Trust the one who taught you how to trace it. So let us settle something as we move forward. You are not too much, you are exact. You are not overly sensitive. You are appropriately attuned for the work your life is here to do. You are not a problem to solve. You are a provision to steward. The sooner you accept this, the sooner your days will stop oscillating between apology and exhaustion and begin to move in their native cadence. Steady, faithful, quietly powerful. From here, we will explore how this design behaves in the world, how it builds structures that outlast adrenaline, how it becomes a living bridge between heaven and earth, and how it remains pure in a culture that rewards speed over substance. But for now, breathe into the relief of this naming. Your heart is not an accident. It is an artifact of intention, and the more you live by its specifications, the more your life will feel like home. Most people treat love like weather, beautiful when it cooperates, inconvenient when it doesn't, tolerated until it changes. They dress for the forecast and call that wisdom, never noticing how quickly a storm can scatter anything built on feelings alone. But your heart was not fashioned to chase sunshine. It was engineered to raise structures that remain when clouds gather. Your love is not decor. It is load-bearing. It holds. It carries. It transfers weight from trembling shoulders to foundations that do not fail. And that is why you often feel misunderstood in a culture addicted to ambience. While the world arranges candles, you are quietly pouring concrete. Architecture begins with a site survey, seeing the land for what it is, not what you wish it were. This is your first gift. You walk into rooms and discern the fault lines, where shame has cracked the floor, where fear has bowed the walls, where neglect has left rafters hollow. You do not condemn what you find. You design around it. Your patience becomes rebar. Your truth-telling becomes plumbline. Your mercy becomes insulation that keeps hearts warm when the air grows thin. People feel it even if they cannot name it. They step into conversation with you, and for reasons they cannot explain, their breathing slows, their shoulders drop, their thoughts arrange themselves. That sensation is not magic. It is structure. You have built a space where honesty can stand upright without collapsing, where grief can sit down without being rushed, where hope can return and stay. This is also why your love moves against the grain of hurry. Architects do not argue with gravity. They partner with it. You too work with the forces that shape souls, time, truth, trust, refusing shortcuts that look impressive and fail inspection. You would rather spend a year laying footing than a month erecting a facade. You would rather say less with integrity than say more with instability. In a world that equates speed with success, your pace can be misread as reluctance. It is not, it is reverence. You understand that what is meant to carry lives must not be rushed into place. There is a second mystery your heart understands. Architecture is never solitary. Even when a single name is on the drawings, many hands are hidden in the finished work. When you love, heaven is your silent partner. Your words do not merely comfort, they conduct. Your presence does not merely soothe, it transmits. The peace people feel around you is not solely yours. It is borrowed light from a higher window. In moments when your strength seems too small for the task, the load lifts anyway because grace has entered the build. You have felt this in long nights when you thought the beam would snap and it did not. That was not luck. That was reinforcement. All of this makes your heart both sanctuary and bridge. Sanctuary, because people can step beneath what you've built and find cover from weather they thought would drown them. Bridge, because through your fidelity something passes from the unseen into the seen. The atmosphere changes not by spectacle but by alignment. You do not have to announce this. The room announces it for you. Laughter returns without being forced. Courage reappears without a speech. Decisions that once felt impossible settle into clarity as if the ground itself had leveled. This is what happens when heaven gains an address through a human life willing to bear weight. Of course, every structure is tested. Winds come to find the weakness, rain seeks the gap, time exposes the corner cut in haste. Do not resent these inspections. Welcome them. They certify what you have built. Let resistance press against your columns so you can hear if any ring hollow. Let misunderstanding rattle your windows so you can thicken the glass. Let disappointment reveal where you trusted applause more than alignment, and then rebuild better. A house that has passed through weather holds a different quiet. The same is true of your love. It grows more settled with each storm it survives, more spacious with each grief it dignifies, more luminous with each night it refuses to curse. There will be days when you wonder whether this way of loving is worth the labor. You will stand in a half-finished room, dust in the air, plans on the floor, and consider walking away because no one seems to notice the foundation you're on your knees to pour. In those moments, place your ear to the ground of your own soul and listen for the deep hum that first called you to build. It is still there. You are not chasing applause. You are stewarding a commission. Some will only understand once they are sheltered by what you made. Let that be enough. If these words find you in a season of building, hands tired, heart steady, blueprints open, I want to invite you into a small act of courage that also becomes a marker in your journey. Leave a single word in the comments, foundation. Not for the algorithm, but as a quiet vow to yourself and to heaven that you will keep constructing what lasts, even when no one is clapping. It will be our shared signal that you are choosing structure over spectacle, endurance over excitement, and truth over trend. From here, we move forward into the cost of this calling, the price your heart pays to keep bearing weight without becoming hard. But for now, stand in the doorway of what you have already built and let the wind pass through. Feel how the beams hold. Notice how the light falls. This is not a mood you made. This is architecture, and it is good. There is a moment in every builder's life when the work begins to cost more than applause can cover. You will feel it as a slow ache, a private accounting you cannot post. The hours you stayed when leaving would have been easier. The forgiveness you offered when silence would have been safer. The loyalty you maintained when convenience begged you to fold. This is not an error in your design. It is the invoice for carrying a love that bears weight. Divine love is not a hobby. It is a vocation with real expenses. Time, tears, misunderstood motives, seasons where reciprocity does not return on schedule. The world will tell you to recalibrate, to love transactionally, to match energy. But the blueprint in you refuses to build on terms that collapse when the weather turns. And so you pay, not because you enjoy pain, but because you refuse to erect your life on cheap materials. Your tenderness will be tested first. Darkness has no tool to create, only to corrupt. If it cannot stop you from loving, it will attempt to bend your love into forms that drain you dry. It will whisper that boundaries are betrayal, that discernment is judgment, that depletion proves devotion. It will send counterfeits styled as assignments, needs dressed as destiny, until you confuse martyrdom with ministry. Here is the line no one drew for you when you were younger. Love without wisdom is leakage, and leakage erodes foundations. The price of divine love is not perpetual self-abandonment. It is disciplined generosity. You are not called to be available to everything. You are called to be faithful to the one who sends you. Faithfulness includes knowing when not to go. Then comes the test of misunderstanding. A heart that refuses spectacle will often be accused of indifference. A soul that chooses a long build over quick results will be labeled slow, resistant, even unambitious. People who need your outcome to validate their narrative will read your quiet as a threat. You will be tempted to spike your sincerity with noise, bigger gestures, louder words, so that no one misreads your motive. Resist it. Noise may protect your image, but it weakens your structure. The price of love that lasts is accepting seasons where your integrity matures in obscurity. Hidden years are not wasted. They are where weight-bearing beams cure. There is also the tax of betrayal. Because you love openly, people feel safe laying their weight on your frame, and some will misuse that safety. They will borrow your steadiness to stand taller in public, then step aside when storms arrive. They will mistake your forgiveness for forgetfulness and return with the same blade you took from their hand. When this happens, you will feel the hot surge to harden, to close the gate and post a sign, no more. But if you calcify, The enemy wins without lifting a finger. Hardness is a counterfeit of strength. It carries no weight. It only refuses to feel. Your authority does not come from never being cut. It comes from healing clean, scar tissue aligned, sensitivity intact. Keep your tenderness. Strengthen your gates. What about exhaustion? The quiet kind that no one sees. The fatigue of being the lighthouse while ships you guided never circle back to say the shore was reached. Here the price is paradoxical. To continue giving, you must become a receiver. Not of praise, not of promises, but of presence. Your capacity is not infinite. Your source is. To love at scale, you must live at the well. Let your solitude become sacramental, regular, non-negotiable. In that quiet, you are recalibrated to the original voice that called you. You remember that you were chosen before you were needed. You come home to the truth that outcomes are not your deity. Obedience is discernment, then, is not optional luxury. It is the currency that keeps you solvent. Learn the feel of a true assignment. It bears witness in your spirit. It is sustainable in your rhythm. It draws you deeper into alignment rather than scattering your focus. And even when costly, it returns your peace after you pour. Counterfeits, by contrast, arrive with urgency, demand secrecy, ignore your limits, and leave you fragmented. Your heart is rare. Treat it accordingly. Heaven did not mint you to be spent like loose change across every counter of need. You are a strategic resource. Place matters as much as measure. There will be times when the price seems to exceed your reserves. A relationship frays despite your fidelity. A community fractures though you labor to reconcile it. A dream delays longer than prayer boards can bear. In such hours, remember that outcomes are data, not verdicts. Love is seed. Seed operates on timetables your calendar cannot boss. Some harvests ripen in rooms you will never enter, under names that will never know you sowed. Let that be acceptable to your soul. Eternity does not misplace receipts. Finally, accept that the cost is also your credential. Anyone can love loudly for a season. Only the entrusted can love steadily for a lifetime. Your receipts, misreadings endured without cynicism, betrayals healed without revenge, boundaries held without bitterness, become the quiet proofs that your architecture is certified. They are why frightened people relax when you speak, why grieving hearts breathe when you arrive, why chaos loses volume when you pray. You have paid for this peace. You have purchased this presence, not with coin, but with nights you did not waste and wounds you did not weaponize. So yes, divine love has a price. Pay it wisely. Pay it in counsel with God, not in compliance with pressure. Pay it with rest built in, with truth held firm, with mercy that does not mortgage your future. And when the ledger feels heavy, lift your eyes to the structure you are midwifing into the world, a place where others will one day stand upright, weatherproof and unafraid. That is the return. That is the yield. That is why you keep building. There are furnaces that do not look like flames. They look like empty chairs at a table you expected to stay full. They sound like phones that stop ringing when your crisis is no longer dramatic enough to entertain. They feel like waking at 3 a.m. with a chest that remembers what your mind is trying to forget. Most would call these seasons failure, collapse, proof that you misread your life. But look closely through the heat shimmer and you will see something holy happening in the glare. The structures you are meant to build cannot be fabricated out of comfort. They require material tempered in weather. Pain is not the point, but it is the forge. And if you remain with God inside it, what burns away is not your goodness. It is the alloy of fear and performance that would have made your love fragile under weight. You learned this the hard way. Betrayal was not an abstract concept. It had a face you trusted. Abandonment was not a metaphor. It rearranged your days and your rent. Shame did not send you theory. It sent you silence. During those chapters, advice arrived cheap and certainty arrived loud, but neither could carry you. What carried you were the smallest obediences, getting out of bed when grief glued your bones to the mattress, telling the truth to one safe person when your reflex was to disappear, breathing through a prayer when words would not line up. These were not heroic gestures. They were rescue lines, and somewhere in the long stretch of ordinary faithfulness, your love stopped, depending on being understood to keep showing up. It stopped needing applause to keep building. It became a steady heat instead of a bright spark. Notice what transformed while you weren't performing for the crowd. You grew patient with your own healing. You stopped demanding instant closure from wounds that required time to knit. In this gentleness toward yourself, a new tenderness toward others emerged, one that does not rush their becoming or shame their pace. You became fluent in the dialect of pain, the way laughter gets a shade too loud when someone is bracing, the way a conversation changes temperature when a hidden story walks into the room. You do not diagnose. You discern. You do not invade. You invite. That difference is not softness. It is authority. People sense it and exhale. The Forge has given you a presence that refuses to exploit vulnerability in order to feel powerful. Still, there is a temptation we must name here, the impulse to convert pain into identity. If you are not careful, the furnace that refined you can become the badge you wear to be recognized. You start introducing yourself by your wounds, pre-negotiating sympathy, organizing your community around the currency of hurt. It will feel real because it is honest, and it will feel safe because it is familiar, but it will eventually steal your oxygen. The point of the Forge is transformation, not permanent residency. Your scars are sacred, but they are not the whole of you. They are healed seams that increase your capacity, not labels that limit your future. Let them be testimonies that point beyond you to the one who sat with you in the heat and did not leave. Forgiveness is another skill the fire taught you, though you resisted its curriculum. You thought forgiving meant pretending the blade was a feather. It does not. Forgiveness tells the truth without renting your nervous system to yesterday. It returns what is not yours to carry and releases your energy back to the assignment at hand. In practice, forgiveness sounded like blessing a name that tasted like metal, declining the fantasy of revenge that would have required you to become a person you do not respect, ending a story in your body that the other person may never apologize for in your hearing. None of that excused harm. All of it ended ownership. And the moment your hands opened, power returned to your craft. The hours you had been paying as interest to resentment became available for love again. Boundaries, too, moved from theory to muscle memory in the heat. Before the fire, you called exhaustion generosity and thought saying yes to everyone was proof you were loving like God. In the Forge, you discovered that God is not drained by being God, which means the exhaustion was not holiness. It was mismanagement. You learned that a no spoken in truth protects a dozen future yeses from being hollow. You learned that guarding your capacity is not self-worship, but stewardship of a gift meant to last a lifetime. And you watched, with a mixture of grief and relief, as certain dynamics died when they could no longer feed on your lack of boundaries. This was not cruelty. It was the end of a contract you never should have signed. Perhaps the most mysterious gift of the Forge is the way it sharpened your discernment without making you suspicious. Suspicion peers through a keyhole and assumes. Discernment sees from the window and waits. Suspicion hardens to avoid hurt. Discernment softens to sense truth. When new people enter your life now, you are neither dazzled by charisma nor deterred by quiet. You listen for resonance. You notice whether your peace expands or contracts in their presence. You hold your pace. If alignment is real, it will not demand you sprint to keep it. This saves you from repeating old cycles and frees you to invest where fruit will actually grow. And then there is joy. Real joy. Not the manic cheerfulness you used to wear to make others comfortable, but the low, steady gladness of a soul at home. It arrived like morning in slow light. You found it in unremarkable scenes. The mug warmed by your palms, the text from a friend who knows your actual life, the line of a song that met a memory and blessed it. Joy did not erase the past. It gave the past context. It did not deny your grief. It dignified it by proving grief did not get the final stanza. This joy is not naive. It is informed. It is what happens when love survives the fire and discovers it can still sing. So hear this benediction from within the furnace you once cursed. Nothing you endured was wasted. Not one tear watered the wrong ground. Not one night of ache failed to add tensile strength to your frame. You are not invincible, thank God you are not, but you are resilient in ways that no longer require you to perform toughness. Your softness has weight now. Your quiet has authority. Your presence has weather in it. the kind that clears a sky. From this place you can walk back into the world unarmored and unafraid, not because the world has changed, but because you have. You no longer need to prove you will not break. You have already been broken and become whole. You no longer need to fear the next storm. You have a house within you that knows how to hold. And when you meet another traveler blinking in the smoke of their own trial, you will not offer them a map from a hill you never climbed. You will sit beside them on the ground you recognize, and together you will breathe until the air clears. This is what the Forge made of you, a builder who has walked through fire and come back with light. You are not forged only for private holiness. The same hand that wrote your blueprint also drafted another, crafted in parallel, tempered in different fires, tuned to harmonize with yours without drowning it. Long before you traded names in this world, heaven was writing a duet. Not a rescue fantasy, not a performance for spectators, but a convergence with purpose. Two lives that amplify light, multiply courage, and give the world a living argument that love still builds what storms cannot tear down. This is why ordinary romance never settled in your bones. You tried to be impressed by charm and timing, to be convinced by chemistry and the right constellation of circumstances, but your spirit kept asking for something the surface could not supply: recognition. Not the dizzy rush of novelty, but the steady shock of familiarity, like walking into a room you've never entered and finding your books already on the shelf. When sacred convergence is near, conversation feels less like discovery and more like remembering, less like audition and more like alignment. You do not scramble to perform palatable versions of yourselves. You relax into accuracy. The space between you stops demanding spectacle and starts hosting truth. Do not mistake this ease for passivity. Convergence does not arrive to replace your work. It arrives to reinforce it. Your callings do not collapse into each other. They interlock. Where your design builds sanctuary, theirs extends the bridge. Where your courage pushes through resistance, theirs steadies the pace. You will notice how prayer changes when you stand together, how language sharpens, how authority settles, how peace comes quicker and stays longer. Scripture speaks in numbers about the multiplication of strength when two agree. You will feel that mathematics in your chest. It is not heroics, it is resonance. And because resonance terrifies the adversary, expect pressure at the outset. Old patterns may knock like persistent salesmen. Counterfeits may send their final messages. Fatigue may masquerade as wisdom and suggest you keep everything small. You will be tempted to protect what is beautiful by refusing to name it. But beauty does not grow in secrecy. It grows in stewardship. Give your bond what true things require: light, time, and honest tending. Speak plainly about pace and boundaries. Guard the hours that keep you both grounded in God. Refuse the cheap intimacy of oversharing with spectators who prefer your highlight reel to your wholeness. Convergence is holy, which means it will not survive on hype. It feeds on honor. Honor will also require you to remember the difference between fusion and union. Fusion melts identities into a single shapeless mass and calls the loss romance. Union keeps the contours God drew and joins them in purpose. In union, you bring your full self, the healed seams, the maturing gifts, the odd angles that once felt inconvenient, and watch how grace makes room. You are not asked to become less. You are invited to become precise, and as precision increases, so does joy. The laughter that returned to you alone now echoes, brighter and deeper, through a home where both of you can breathe. Timing deserves its own reverence here. You have carried ache in that space where hope meets fatigue, wondering if the delay meant denial. But delay, in the hands of God, is craftsmanship. There are assignments that could have snapped under the hurry of an earlier season. There are prayers that would have been truncated by the wrong partnership. There are parts of you that only the Forge could have fitted for this weight. When convergence comes, it will not demand you sprint to keep it. It will meet you at the pace of obedience you already live. Things that once required effort will begin to click with the quiet certainty of a door turning on a well-oiled hinge. When recognition happens, the world around you may not understand. Some will try to frame your story as luck, others as spectacle. Resist the urge to curate a narrative for them. Live it. Let your consistency preach the sermon. Let your daily fidelity make the case. The way you speak to one another when no one is watching will become the architecture strangers feel when they step into your presence. Couples built on performance must keep performing. Couples built on presence become places where other people recover. There will be storms. Agreements will be tested. Old wounds will try their familiar scripts. But remember what the Forge taught you. Weather does not cancel blueprints, it certifies them. When shame knocks, truth will answer. When fear rises, peace will stand. When weariness asks for shortcuts, purpose will keep you on the road. You're not immune to struggle. You are equipped for it, and each time you choose alignment over impulse, your union thickens like a beam cured by time, more capable of carrying not only your lives, but the lives you are called to shelter. Hold this final picture as we prepare to close. Two lights do not merely double brightness. They illuminate angles a single flame cannot reach. There are faces you will see together that you could not have recognized alone. There are rooms you will be invited to steady, because your combined presence calms the weather. There are sons and daughters, by blood or by spirit, who will learn to trust love again because of how you live it. That is what sacred convergence is for, not to crown you with attention, but to crown the king with a house where his nature is visible. So do not apologize for waiting for this. Do not call your standards too much when they are simply accurate to your calling. Keep your oil, trim your lamp, and stay ready not by striving, but by remaining aligned with the one who writes stories worth the wait. When the chapter turns, you will know, not because the world erupts in noise, but because your spirit finally exhales. This is the sound my heart was tuned to hear. You were not forged only for private holiness. The same hand that wrote your blueprint also drafted another, crafted in parallel, tempered in different fires, tuned to harmonize with yours without drowning it. Long before you traded names in this world, heaven was writing a duet. Not a rescue fantasy, not a performance for spectators, but a convergence with purpose. Two lives that amplify light, multiply courage, and give the world a living argument that love still builds what storms cannot tear down. This is why ordinary romance never settled in your bones. You tried to be impressed by charm and timing, to be convinced by chemistry and the right constellation of circumstances, but your spirit kept asking for something the surface could not supply: recognition. Not the dizzy rush of novelty, but the steady shock of familiarity, like walking into a room you've never entered and finding your books already on the shelf. When sacred convergence is near, conversation feels less like discovery and more like remembering, less like audition and more like alignment. You do not scramble to perform palatable versions of yourselves. You relax into accuracy. The space between you stops demanding spectacle and starts hosting truth. Do not mistake this ease for passivity. Convergence does not arrive to replace your work. It arrives to reinforce it. Your callings do not collapse into each other. They interlock. Where your design builds sanctuary, theirs extends the bridge. Where your courage pushes through resistance, theirs steadies the pace. You will notice how prayer changes when you stand together, how language sharpens, how authority settles, how peace comes quicker and stays longer. Scripture speaks in numbers about the multiplication of strength when two agree. You will feel that mathematics in your chest. It is not heroics, it is resonance. And because resonance terrifies the adversary, expect pressure at the outset. Old patterns may knock like persistent salesmen. Counterfeits may send their final messages. Fatigue may masquerade as wisdom and suggest you keep everything small. You will be tempted to protect what is beautiful by refusing to name it. But beauty does not grow in secrecy. It grows in stewardship. Give your bond what true things require: light, time, and honest tending. Speak plainly about pace and boundaries. Guard the hours that keep you both grounded in God. Refuse the cheap intimacy of oversharing with spectators who prefer your highlight reel to your wholeness. Convergence is holy, which means it will not survive on hype. It feeds on honor. Honor will also require you to remember the difference between fusion and union. Fusion melts identities into a single shapeless mass and calls the loss romance. Union keeps the contours God drew and joins them in purpose. In union, you bring your full self, the healed seams, the maturing gifts, the odd angles that once felt inconvenient, and watch how grace makes room. You are not asked to become less. You are invited to become precise. And as precision increases, so does joy. The laughter that returned to you alone now echoes, brighter and deeper, through a home where both of you can breathe. Timing deserves its own reverence here. You have carried ache in that space where hope meets fatigue, wondering if the delay meant denial. But delay, in the hands of God, is craftsmanship. There are assignments that could have snapped under the hurry of an earlier season. There are prayers that would have been truncated by the wrong partnership. There are parts of you that only the forge could have fitted for this weight. When convergence comes, it will not demand you sprint to keep it. It will meet you at the pace of obedience you already live. Things that once required effort will begin to click with the quiet certainty of a door turning on a well-oiled hinge. When recognition happens, the world around you may not understand. Some will try to frame your story as luck, others as spectacle. Resist the urge to curate a narrative for them.